It's summer here. I just wanted to say I hope everyone is doing well with the quarantine that's going on. I am so sad this is the end of the semester, but I am also glad at the same time because it has been really hard and really difficult doing everything at home, as much as y'all know. I just hope everyone is doing very well, especially with finals coming up this week. Just keep on trucking. Summer's almost here, ironically. Um, but today I just wanted to talk to all y'all about genetic enhancement. So I don't know if any of y'all read the textbook, but on page 604 is where it starts, and it's by somebody named Savulescu. I hope you're struggling with that name, so please just bear with me throughout this. But Savulescu likes to go on and talk about what he thinks about genetic enhancement, and that he believes that people should do it and that they are morally obligated to do it. So let me just start off with saying what Savulescu says in our bioethics textbook on page 604. He says, "I want to argue that far from being morally permissible, we have a moral obligation or moral reason to enhance ourselves and our children." And I don't know if you noticed, I tried to put a little emphasis on the fact that he said moral obligation and not permissible, because he says that if you are to not genetically enhance your child, then he's saying that you are wrong for doing so because you're not giving them the best benefit. Instead of being permissible, saying that yes, it's okay, and it's okay if you do it, it's okay if you don't. But he's saying if you don't do it, then you're just wrong, which is a little contradicting to the fact that he votes for and he approves the idea of a liberal eugenics versus a state eugenics. And for those of y'all who don't know what state eugenics and liberal eugenics is, state eugenics is when the state and the government control whether you're able to genetically enhance your child or yourself, for that fact, whether you're able to do that or not. And if you are to do that, they'll use brute force to enforce it. Whereas liberal is more so a voluntary, I guess is what you said in a lecture earlier. Liberal is more voluntary, you have the choice of doing it, and if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. But Savulescu kind of voiced that point of saying that if you don't do it, then you're wrong, kind of changes what he may think about what liberal eugenics is, or kind of his viewpoint on it. I think that when someone says liberal eugenics, I'm like, you have the choice of doing it, you have the choice of not doing it, and it doesn't matter which way you go, and that's why it should be permissible, more so than being obligation. And that's just kind of where he kind of faults in that section just a little bit, and it makes you a little iffy. Savulescu also goes on to talk about the neglect and the price of which this new procedure may come to in cost. So on the next page, on page 605 of our bioethics textbook, Savulescu also says, "Neglectful parents give birth to a child with special condition. The child has a stunning intellect, but the parents neglect to give him a supplement that is readily available and is very cheap." He says that this is clearly wrong. I will have to say that this, just because someone is not giving their child a supplement to help benefit their intelligence, if they were a super child and they became normal to be like what we quote unquote say normal child, that's not actually hindering their capabilities or their intelligence any at all. You're just giving them the same advantage as everyone else. Maybe the family just doesn't know how to afford or know how to get that so-called cheap and readily available supplement. I don't know if you know this, but this procedure is not cheap. It is actually very, very expensive. And as one of the articles that I have listed below, it says on the Genetics Home reference, says this is just to run the test, not to actually do the procedure, but just to run the test to see if there is anything wrong. Just for the test, it can range from $100 to $2,000. Now, some of y'all may not seem like a lot, but for some other people, it can be a lot. And so that just means that not everyone can afford it. So not everyone has a chance of being that perfect parent. So he's kind of saying that you're neglecting your child by not putting all your money that you don't have into his future. And it's not okay. But the money aspect, not everyone has it. I also have somewhere in here that a lot of states and a lot of insurance companies will cover for it, but others will not. So some states and some insurance companies will be there to help cover most of the costs, so you have to pay maybe $25-$30. But for people who don't have a great insurance and people who don't live in that state, will still have to pay for the full cost, and they more than likely may not have that money. Next, I want to go on to say, or now, finally, eventually, I want to just go on to say that Savulescu never actually says any of the negatives about doing this procedure. He talks about how it may be against religion or maybe against social status and things of that nature, but he never says what the actual physical conditions can be or the physical outcomes that can happen because of this. And I think that's also a big red flag as well, is that he states all the positive and non-positive, but he doesn't give you the negatives. So I wanted to give you the negatives. In another article called Designer Babies, the author Hunt says many sought after traits in offspring, such as intelligence, are not concrete in their location, as in they can be in multiple places. The brain can fall victim to severe damage, causing impairment and disease. So if you think about it, if you were to go in and genetically modify or enhance someone's material or DNA, you may be changing something to what you think would be better, to change, maybe make them smarter. You may try and do that, but they still may not get to your level of intelligence that you may want from them. Mostly because, like he says, it is not concrete in the location that you can find it, but it is multiple locations throughout the genome. And if you accidentally change something to another mutation or another disease that we don't know about yet, that could be actually life-threatening and very harmful for that child or that human later on throughout their life. So just to kind of wrap up what I was saying and just kind of recap everything, Savulescu goes on to say one thing about how he thinks about enhancement being that it should be people's choice, but saying if it is your choice, you're being morally wrong if you go against his word or go against his thought. But then he also goes on and says that it's readily available and cheap for people, when that's not necessarily the case. Not everyone has that insurance, or not everyone lives in that state. And lastly, he never actually explains what are the negative side effects from this, what can negatively come out, what negative outcomes can come from this. He just never mentions anything about it. So the whole point of this is just I wanted to let you know what kind of entails a little bit on genetic enhancements. I didn't go into as much detail as I would like, but just kind of just tell you like what goes on, what happens in it, and that Savulescu has a lot of flaws in his theory, his ideal thinking about it, because he doesn't cover all the basics. And I just want everyone to realize when it comes to something such a major decision like this one that we may be holding in our future, you need to take a lot of precautions and you need to take a lot of research into seeing what actually can come out and what actually goes into this type of procedure. And that's kind of what I wanted y'all to learn today. So I really thank you, and I just want to say I've had a great semester with you.